Hi, Rebecca Zung, top 1% divorce attorney here, and this is part 2 of a 2-part episode on my joint effort with Dr. Ramani, the foremost expert in narcissism in the world from a psychological perspective. She and I have come together to do a series for you on how to negotiate with a narcissist in divorce, and this is part 2 of a 2-part episode on how to co-parent with a narcissist. So make sure you hit the little subscribe button, hit the little notification bell so that you can be notified when we upload more episodes in this series. And if you haven't watched part 1 of this episode already, make sure you go ahead and do that. I will drop a link to that below. So without further ado, let's dive into part 2 of how to co-parent with a narcissist.
All right, so then, okay, now working from that then, again, I'm always going to say it's important for your child to be in therapy, but it may be a process to get there if you have a really, really, stonewalling narcissist in your life. So, one of the other struggles, obviously, is in the day-to-day. Like you said, they're always they're always moving the goalposts. They're always shape-shifting. So you're constantly, and that's part of the realistic expectations. You can almost count on it, and this is where I say that I tell people you've got to keep that sort of post-divorce diary. In that, I tell them it's got to be your daily practice. That you say
not just post-divorce.
I mean, in
throughout
perpetuity,
the whole process.
In perpetuity, but every text, every voicemail,
while it's pending,
everything has to be saved.
Everything documented.
Everything documented, everything saved. But then I also tell people you need to get your own impressions down. Like, how is your child doing today? How did they do at the drop-off? You might think, well, what am I supposed to do with this? Maybe nothing. You may not even share it with an attorney. But what you may need it for is to look at sort of some of the rhythms for yourself. This may be stuff you share with a therapist, with a pediatrician, when you're monitoring them for school and all of that. So let's jump to school, okay? Mm-hmm. Because obviously at schools, at parent-teacher conferences is always sometimes that white-knuckle experience. And I'm sure many of you who are teachers can relate to the number of times you've dealt with a tense narcissistic divorce situation where people are trying to co-parent and they're both present. So obviously, as per the law, both parents have the right to be at those parent-teacher conferences.
Yep.
Many people say to me, how are we supposed to handle that? If I had my way, I would go no contact with this person. But because we have this child, we have to. And some of the tips I say to people is, as much as possible, you don't want to engage with this person. So they're often going to try to corral you before the conference or after the conference. You show up right on time to the conference, so there's no hanging out. And you either lie about having something right afterwards, or you do have something right afterwards. You get the hell out of Dodge. Like you do not stand around, because those little opportunities, because you've already been abused by this narcissist and they've done such a number on you, that there is still a lot of sort of traumatic stress associated with this. And so to the degree you wouldn't engage with them anyhow, this is an opportunity to just kind of get out of there.
And they're going to be looking for opportunities to get you alone, away from your lawyer or away from the people around you, for sure.
Yeah.
So what I want to do is kind of take it a little bit more 30,000-foot level, and that is when it comes time to medical or educational decisions, things like that, it's actually part of the parenting plan, and it's ultimate decision-making authority or it's joint decision-making authority. Those are the really only two choices, or unless you have sole custody or something like that.
Got it.
But pretty much just like 50-50 is the presumption for the actual time-sharing plan as far as responsibility, parental responsibility, and having the ability to participate. Medical, educational, religion, all of those main areas are just considered parental responsibility, and that is presumed to also be shared. And that also means access to medical records. It also means access to school records.
Right.
It also means being able to both attend doctor's appointments or the parent-teacher conferences, like what you were referring to. So that is going to be presumed. What I have found in my experience is that if one parent has acted unilaterally over and over and over again to a point where they have cut out the other parent. They've made big decisions about the child. They've put them in private school without the other parent. They've selected a healthcare provider without getting the input from the other parent. They went to multiple doctor's appointments without the other parent. That's when this court will step in and say, okay, the parent who was the innocent one in that particular scenario, now gets ultimate decision-making authority as to that area. I actually had it happen.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So it's not like the court tries to say, hey, now we need to do this collaboratively. It's almost like they're punishing the one who broke all the rules and rewarded the one who was actually cut out of the decision-making process. That's interesting.
Yeah, and the other thing that I have done, and I have actually done successfully, is have language in the agreement that, when one parent has done that over and over again, then you file a modification. You say, I want to modify the parenting plan. I want ultimate decision-making authority as to this area because this other parent has been terrible. So what the other parent then panics and whatever and says, no, I don't want to agree to that. And, maybe they countersue for other things or whatever. So what I have found is that you can say, okay, we'll keep it at shared.
Right.
But if you make one more unilateral decision where I haven't had a say, then I automatically get ultimate decision-making authority.
And that agreement needs to be crafted that way
and you write it that way. It's like a springing clause that just immediately goes into effect.
It's like a third strike law.
Correct. But the thing is, in order for it to be recorded in the court, because you can say, oh, it happened, fine. But the last order or the last final judgment in the court is the one that's always going to control. So you do still need to make that change with the court.
Okay.
So what you then need to do is have language in there that says, I don't need to have to come to court for this. If I tell you that this happened and I have proof and I can submit affidavits and whatever. So I have a case right now where this happened. And right after we signed all of this paperwork, the mother, who was the offender, signs off on an IEP, an individualized education plan for the child. Signed off on it and had all kinds of things in there that the former husband didn't agree to. School's like freaking out. I see what this court order says. We don't want to get involved. So the school sends out a formal letter on letterhead to both parents saying this former wife violated it, blah, blah, blah. Husband actually attached that letter to an affidavit, sent it to the judge, got his ultimate decision-making authority. Didn't even have to appear in court.
Okay.
So, but there's another added layer of teeth that people can add to that, and this is what I do in my agreements. And that is that they can put a fees provision in there. Not only if you violate it, do I get springing, ultimate decision-making authority. Now, if you violated it, you're going to have to pay my fees to go to court to deal with this.
There you go. Because that's what a lot of people sort of push back on, like, oh my God, I don't want to pay more court fees.
Correct.
But
you're going to have to pay both sides' fees.
Right. So, as you're saying all this, it reflects on all the strategy that can be used to manage this. Again, on my chair, all I see is exhausted clients.
Yeah.
Every single thing.
And that's what they plan on. They will break you down and so suck the life out of you.
You are exhausted, and it's real. I mean, that exhaustion is real. There's a point at which you feel like you do genuinely have symptoms of post-traumatic stress, depression, anxiety, and other things like rumination, self-doubt, sometimes even self-loathing, and then feelings of helplessness, hopelessness, and powerlessness. I'm here to tell you those feelings are absolutely normal because you're giving the reaction we'd expect in this kind of a situation. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you as a parent or wrong with you as a parent or as a person, or that you're somehow severely mentally ill. You may be experiencing symptoms of mental illness, including depression and anxiety, which is why I always tell people who are going through these really volatile co-parenting situations, if you can get into good therapy, get into good therapy. But what we're seeing more and more out there is a tremendous online community that comes at no or low cost, where you can join groups and even group therapy and online group therapy to help you deal with this. You need that support, and you need to be in a world where you're told this is a circus, because it starts becoming your normal. And so even as though all these strategies are amazing and need to be done, people are getting worn down, because for any of us who are trying to balance and get kids to school and to doctors and all that, that's exhausting enough. But when you're having to do it under these contentious circumstances, you can really, again, become helpless, hopeless, feel powerless, and really go into a dark place. So, which is to be expected, but to get that help, get that support, and understand,
100%.
sadly, that this is part of this process. Another thing you keep bringing up again and again, and I think it's important to talk about on this episode, is parenting plans. That's something you've talked about a lot. I know what that means on my side, because I've seen them from some clients, but structurally, if you could talk about that, I think that would be very useful.
Yeah. So there's a parenting plan. It includes a couple of different elements. One is the actual time sharing plan, which is kind of what we talked about at the outset when we were talking about 50-50. And then it also talks about parental responsibility. Sometimes it also includes breakdown of costs for things like that, but most of the time, anything financial is a separate issue. So in my mind, a pure parenting plan is just the parental, the time sharing, and then the parental responsibility. And then it includes all kinds of other, what I call aspirational language, which would be like, neither parent will disparage the other parent, whatever. And, my client's going to be, he disparaged me, look, and I was like, okay, so what's the judge going to do? Don't do that. I mean, it's really, I call it aspirational language because it's really hard to enforce.
Right.
But sorry, people. I mean, I hate that that's the way it is, but it is.
That's why we're doing this series. I mean, obviously, in many cases, it's not. But, in some ways, the aspirational language almost feels antagonistic, because you're putting this thing down, knowing that, in fact, in some ways, the narcissist may even go out of their way to poke at it. So, I think that it's almost like a mixed bag. You put it in there, it's aspirational, it's not really enforceable, but at least it's down. But some people feel it's like even more frustrating, because it's always like what they do. They try to come just 1 millimeter underneath that one thing where it's, where they're going to actually, it's going to be enforceable. That's the challenge.
Or they'll say it was inadvertent, or I didn't mean it that way, or whatever. Or I was late because of something, or I didn't drop them off because my plane was late, or whatever. I mean, even though they could have controlled it. I mean, of course, that's what they're going to do. And a lot of the parenting plans include things like, the child's rights. The child has a right to two parents who love him or her. The child has a right, which is all great stuff. I'm certainly not mocking it at all. Of course, it's great stuff. But when you're dealing with a narcissist, it's just a waste of space on the paper a lot of times. I mean, so what my advice to people is number one, you have to have as specific a parenting plan as possible. I mean, literally, who's driving, to pick up the kids, who's driving to drop the kids off, where is it happening, exactly what time, and not just the regular parenting plan, but Christmas Day or Hanukkah or whatever it is. If there are Monday holidays that you want to handle, how is that going to be handled? And if parents switch weekends, now all of a sudden one has 3 weekends in a row. So how is that going to be handled? Are you going to now switch it back? Every single thing has to be contemplated, because the stronger it is, the less conflict you'll have down the road.
I don't know that you'll have less conflict, but it'll be more enforceable, because it's very clear what the parameters are.
And
I think
it is
always
less
be
conflict. I mean, here's the thing. A lot of times people will say to me, well, we're getting along, and we don't need and so they just put sort of general language, a husband will get to see the parent whenever he can, or something like that. Okay, well, the thing is, just like there aren't divorce fairies that jump out and make people behave, there aren't divorce fairies that jump out and make people adhere to court orders. So if you choose not to use your parenting plan, no one is going to care or know unless you file a motion to enforce that. So, you just want to be able to fall back on it and go, this is what we're going to do. The other thing you can do when it comes to dealing with a narcissist is something that we call parallel parenting, which is where you basically are in different worlds and you really interact as little as possible, unless there's an emergency or a sickness that needs to be communicated. All of the pickup and drop-offs are at school. Or some other neutral place on if there's a vacation or a holiday, and you just don't ever interact with each other, which I highly recommend if you're dealing with a narcissist.
Especially if you're dealing with a malignant narcissist. And there's another thing that comes up, though, psychologically. When these very, very detailed parenting plans are getting set, a thing that often comes up is that the narcissist will say, oh, you're being petty. We don't need to write all of this down. Don't be ridiculous. It's a gaslighting maneuver because you know in your heart of hearts, if it's not this structured, they are going to find every single loophole. But yet, that gaslighting of calling you petty or ridiculous, it's the technique they've been using on you for a long time. And it's very easy to get talked out of that kind of detail orientation because none of us really want to walk around thinking we're very petty. But they'll always try that and say, oh, come on, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out is never going to be the right answer. Correct. And that you also have to sometimes coach your own attorney. Not all attorneys are Rebecca. Some don't get it. And your attorney's like, oh, well, come on. And you have to hold to that line of a parenting plan that almost feels obsessive for how detailed it is. Because if you have that unicorn of a narcissist that does improve enough over time that they aren't fighting it as much, the one thing that can make that unicorn narcissist sometimes come up is when they get into a new relationship. They start a new family and they're bored of you, they discard your child. It's heartbreaking to witness and experience because now your child's like, oh, family B is in, I was in family A, I'm out. The benefit to that, though, is sometimes they stop caring, and so they're just like, sure, you can have them for every Thanksgiving in perpetuity. I'm going to Barbados. So, there is, but there's all these little twists, and the best way, it's like any company, like a company that has policies and procedures. They may seem excessive. They have them so they can enforce them. And so don't get talked out of it, which they're going to try to do through gaslighting. Hold your line. Yeah,
and the other thing that I see them doing all the time is they'll hold you to the letter of the agreement, but themselves.
Yes.
That's a different story.
That's a different story. And that hypocrisy is a natural part of narcissism, that they love rules that apply to other people, not to them. So they're entitled, they're hypocritical. You need to sort of be, you need to be sort of on top of that. So, do you have any other thoughts on co-parenting? I have a few other thoughts psychologically, but from your side as an attorney.
We've hit on a lot of them. I want to make sure that we actually specifically hit documentation again a little bit more, because right from the beginning, you should be logging and documenting every little thing, keeping copies of every email, keeping copies of every text. And also, one thing that I always say to people is remember that every text, every writing, everything you put your hand to is a potential trial exhibit. And if you don't want to see it again, then don't send it. But it goes the other way too. And narcissists will often conflict themselves. They will send one text that conflicts with another, or they'll and so you'll be able to keep track of all of that. And so make sure you keep copies of all of that. Keep your phone close. Keep the note section of your phone open. And just even the smallest of things, the things that you don't necessarily think are that big of a deal, just keep a log of it. And one of the things I want to make a point about with the temporary parenting plan is a lot of the times, especially the moms that I see, and, I've got 4 kids, so I get it, they go, oh, he's never taken care of, he doesn't know how to take care of a baby, blah, blah, blah. On the temporary parenting plan, it's good to give them rope to hang themselves.
Yes, I agree.
So give them some time, because they won't take it. They can't help being themselves. And they will end up wanting to switch the schedule, and they will end up not showing up. And then you will have this beautiful log by the time you get 100%. To trial of how even during the case, they couldn't keep a 50-50 parenting plan.
Absolutely. And I think that's exactly what it is that you sometimes set the oddest sorts of traps, because it's almost like traps they're going to trap themselves in, but you just need to set them. But for some people, it provokes anxiety in them to do it on the first
I know,
on the
it's
first
so
place.
hard
Yeah.
when you're wanting to protect your child.
Yes.
It's the hardest thing, and I did it. I mean, with my older 3 kids, I had to co-parent with their dad, who was not a narcissist and not a bad guy, but there were things going on at his house that I didn't necessarily love. And you know, that's the thing, when you're no longer in the same house, you know, things that go on in the other side are sometimes hard to take and hard to deal with. But you know, those are the thing is, it's like what we said in the beginning. Narcissists are going to be narcissists. This is just a way to manage the situation, a way to deal with it in a way that gives you as much control as you can have over the process.
Yeah. And one of the most psychologically difficult issues I face, whether it's through the many emails we get, the comments on these videos, or the people who come in my office, and I sometimes feel helpless too, is how desperately they are like, please, can you give me an answer? Can you almost like give them that magic bullet, that magic wand? We don't have that. She doesn't, I don't. I mean, there are sort of rules and laws around this. And so many times a person will be sort of watching their child really have to go through the rigors of being with that narcissistic parent, whether it's 50% of the time, whether it's more or it's less, and it really, really starts to take a toll on that child. They may even be concerned that that child is starting to mirror that parent and pick up some of their language, their dismissiveness. And I'm going to be totally frank with you, and I'd be curious to hear what Rebecca says. You going back into court and saying, my child is now mirroring their narcissistic behavior, is a pointless endeavor.
Totally.
It's pointless. And so I know that you're looking to say, okay, there's got to be a way to stop this. Unfortunately, with some of this is the tragic legacy of one of these relationships. Now, there are some things you can do. And one thing is that you have to double down on being the empathic and emotionally available and skilled parent. Now, depending on where your child is developmentally, that's going to have a lot to do with it. Obviously, with a smaller child, that might be expressed through play, or the way you read with them, or movies or TV shows you watch. One thing I always tell people, if you have a co-parent who's a narcissist and really is kind of that mean-spirited, competitive, negating and validating person, make sure you do things like play board games with your child so they get the experience of losing sometimes and having to regulate their disappointment when they lose. Read books with them and stop during the story and have the child reflect on how a character might be feeling. How do you think the cat feels, or how do you think this one feels? And even as your child gets older and goes into adolescence, just because you're leaving the movie theater or turning off the movie, don't just go your separate ways. Sit with your child for a moment and have a conversation maybe about the psychology or the emotions of that character. I'm thinking even most recently, the Joker was a great example of a film where you had this really dark, complicated character. You can have a conversation about any significant character in a film where you can try to make it an emotional conversation just to flex that emotional, empathic muscle in your child, whether they're a baby watching little baby shows or they're a 17-year-old. But you've got to be that parent that models empathy, that models grace, that shows them about going high when the other parent's going low. Like, you have to be the better person. The complaint I hear from a lot of parents is, this isn't fair. None of this is fair. None of it is fair. And the most fair, just thing that can happen is that despite the circumstance that your child is in, you're giving them a little bit of an emotional muscle or head start. If you're getting fought on things like therapy and it's taking a long time to get that going, don't balk at things that could be viewed as classes, so they wouldn't necessarily be therapy. That includes things like meditation and mindfulness. Those things don't always fall under therapy, but what it does is it helps your child work on emotional regulation. So by finding those other fixes, and I actually think mindfulness training is brilliant for any child going through this, because it's the opposite of what their parent is, who's often impulsive and clearly not in the moment. And it gives your child one more emotional tool in their arsenal that you're giving them. So you're going to find those workarounds. Spend time in nature with them. The narcissistic parent will often put them in front of screens and devices or over entertain them, right? We're going to go to a theme park and this and this and this. You want to almost down-regulate them at times. Take them to a park, take them on a walk, lie on your back, look for shapes and clouds. You have to figure out the ways to be that offset, giving them structure, keeping them on bedtimes. That's how you co-parent. You co-parent by honestly doing the parenting work for two. The 4 or 5 days you have with your child, you're often having to make up with for the errors of the previous 4 or 5 days. You can do this, but you have to be aware of it. And a lot of people, again, get caught in the justice piece. Let it go. This isn't just, none of it's just, but if your kids still end up with a good head on their shoulders, that's about all the justice you can get.
I totally agree. I actually have a whole section in my book, and I've talked many times on various television and things that I've done about the difference between divorce law and divorce justice. Divorce justice doesn't exist.
No.
There's the law, and that's what exists.
That's it.
And you have to deal within the paradigm of that.
And then I really, again, please hear what Rebecca said. You have to work within the law, and the law doesn't always feel just. That's where, for you, as the co-parent of someone with a narcissist, some form of mental health intervention or support other people going through this becomes absolutely critical. So
Great advice,
yeah.
great advice.
So
I want to mention I have a Facebook page that's free, a Facebook group, Narcissist Negotiators with Rebecca Zung. It's free to join. If you're on Facebook, just join. I have a couple of questions just to keep it, because I do keep it private just so that it's a safe space. But it is free to join.
Right. And there are lots of resources out there. And so, explore those. There's information out there. You're not alone. We wouldn't be making these videos if there wasn't a huge community of people who desperately need this advice. But again, to all of you who kept asking for content on co-parenting, it's our sincere hope that this has answered your questions, but maybe it hasn't. And we'd love it if you drop some comments down below if you still have questions or thoughts, because Rebecca and I, this is the beginning of a long, long collaboration. And so it's the questions and the comments and the issues that you raise that are going to fortify what we go forward and bring to people. And so hopefully that way we answer a larger spectrum of questions.
And I definitely want to encourage those of you who are listening right now, if you're my listeners, please subscribe to Dr. Ramani and vice versa, because we come at this from different angles. We complement each other. The psychological perspective, the legal perspective, you need both. And so I would encourage you to subscribe to her channel as well.
And one other last thing I want to throw at everyone, and it's a little out of order, but it's worth mentioning. Many times when people are going through the whole co-parenting experience and have gone through the end of the marriage, the divorce, and the many, many years post-divorce, is how do I educate my family? Because you're going through this, you're getting the information, you're reading the books, but your family still thinks this is a garden variety divorce and thinks you're overreacting, meaning that your family may still be gaslighting you and not getting it. And some of them, God forbid, may still kind of be a fan of your narcissistic ex. You can absolutely show them something like this content, but they may or may not agree with it. But keep in mind that for many of you, that's a massive stressor. When you're hearing this, you found your community, you're on the Facebook groups, you're listening to us, but the people in your world, in your family, in your network of friends, and remember, after a marriage, you not only split up the china and the cars and the kids, you also split up the friends. And so they're also going to hold different narratives about your marriage. And at some point, you sometimes have to become just a lot more discerning. And the end of your marriage may mean not just the end of one life as you thought it, but your whole life as you thought of it.
Totally.
And it may mean letting go of some of those past voices and people who might be a big part of the reason you stayed in the marriage in the first place. So it may be time to clean house. You know darn well you can come to my content, and I will teach you how to get those narcissists out of your life, just like getting rats out of your attic.
100% good advice. Very good advice. This has been incredible.
Thank you. You've answered so many of my questions I get to take back to my clients now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, and so make sure you guys tune in to the first 3 parts of this series if you haven't already. And also part 5 coming up is going to be on parental alienation, which is one of the hardest, toughest, most heartbreaking areas to tackle. And we tackle that next.
Thanks again for tuning in. Stay tuned for more content, taking on parental alienation, which is a logical extension. Watch the rest of the series if you haven't, and please check out both of our channels to get as much content as you can on these issues. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining me today on this part 2 of our 2-part episode on how to co-parent with a narcissist. If you haven't already grabbed my Crush My Negotiation Prep worksheet and you're getting ready to negotiate with a narcissist, you will definitely want to do that now. Don't walk into a negotiation without it. I will drop a link to that below. And if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, make sure you do that now so that you can be notified when I upload more episodes with me and Dr. Ramani talking about how to negotiate with a narcissist. Just hit the little notification bell and hit the subscribe button, and then you'll be notified. Thanks for stopping by today. I'm so glad that you're here. And remember that today is a great day to start negotiating your best life.